Good evening, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Bede. I'm really well, thanks. And are you well too?
I'm good. I'm going good. Now,
That's
this
good.
is the third talk in a series that covers Dayananda's psychology. Um, what if this is the first one that you've heard? I would encourage you to listen to the first two first, but it will stand alone. Okay. All right. So we were talking about. Remember the first talk we talked about the whole purpose of Swami Dayananda's teaching is to bring about a way of being in the world that is free. Okay, so being able to live in the world in freedom. That's his whole go, if you like. That's what we're looking at. And so when we're going to be talking about the three aspects of the individual, we're only interested in looking at these three aspects in order to open up the whole nature of what freedom is,
Mhm.
relatively speaking.
Right.
Okay. So, and we said that what you've got is you've got myself as as in terms of conduct, my way of living in terms of conduct, my way of living in terms of cognition, seeing, perception, and my way of living in terms of the movement of my heart, in terms of values.
Yeah.
Now,
The three aspects.
if we're talking about transformation of the individual, the word transformation means trans, means across. And so it's a shift from one form to another form. And in what we're looking at here is we're looking at a form of life in the world that is not free. And we're looking at the discovery of a way of being in the world which is free. But we don't want some intellectual, high flying, all freedom and all of this stuff, right? We want to bring it down to a very practical understanding of what freedom is.
Yeah.
Okay. Because again, if I don't live the freedom that he's talking about, there is no point. There's no point.
Yeah. So freedom, as we often think of, ways that we seek freedom, then they're not as lasting, deep, deep, satisfying. Is that where you're going to?
What happens is that it's good that you bring that up because we go into the whole thing of cognition, how we see life. We've got notions about what freedom means that are just simply not true. And we also don't actually really know what freedom is because in order to live freedom, we have to know what it is. Now, what Swami Dayananda does is he unfolds what it is. So it's a discovery.
Well, I often think of the common sense notion of freedom, which is that I can do whatever I want without having to do what someone else asked me to do. But we're not talking about that, right?
No, we tend to think of freedom as getting what we want and being able to do what we like,
Hmm.
right? And so,
Yeah.
and that's very appealing, but it may not necessarily be freedom. So we're going to look at, first of all, we're going to look at this whole area of cognition, right? In other words, me seeing myself, me seeing the world, and me seeing other people.
Hmm.
Okay, so when I'm looking, often I'm preoccupied with me, I'm preoccupied with other people and what they're like, whether they're good or they're bad or they're right or they're wrong, and the world, whether it's good and bad and right and wrong. And so what happens is that we're always looking, or we're always seeing from a point of view.
Yeah, we see the world as the source of our discontent, and that includes others in it. Right?
Yeah, but just going back a little bit further than that, before we even go into that area, what happens is that in my life, a whole lot of ideas have been built into me, not because of my own observation and discrimination, not because of awareness and discrimination. Rather, they have been built into me from my environment. And now these notions have become my way of seeing. Okay? They become my way of seeing. So
Yep.
what this means is that before a spiritual teaching, all we have, and also when we're still, we're still affected by this, but we've got all this background of experiences, and out of that background of experiences, we come to firm conclusions about what I am and who I am, what other people are in relation to me, and what the world is like. And if we do the Freudian understanding, by the time we're 6, and by the way, Dayananda agreed with this, by the time we're 6, that view of the world, what I'm like, what the world is like, and what other people are like, and how they are in relation to me, becomes fixed, becomes solidly fixed.
Right.
Built around our binding desires, built around our cravings for certain types of experience that make us happy.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? So, and Swami Dayananda gives an example of it's a dark room, a slightly dark room, and there's a rope in the corner. Then suddenly you think, oh, there's a snake there. Ah, right? There's a snake there. Now, let's just have a look at what that story means practically. So what happens is there a snake in the corner, or is there a rope?
Well, if I don't know the difference, I would make an assumption
I'm
that
assuming that there's
what I think it is.
I'm
That what I
thinking,
think it is, what it is, right?
I am thinking that there is a snake in the corner, but you notice how that's a notion, but I'm not aware of the notion or the assumption there is a snake in the corner. I am actually having a perception. As far as I am concerned, I am seeing a snake. And I am convinced that I'm looking at reality. This is important. I am convinced that I am looking at reality. I have an idea, and I just know that it's true. But I'm unconscious of the fact that it has nothing to do with reality. It's got something to do with reality, but it is that I am not seeing. What I am seeing is what seems to be, but not what really is.
So are you saying that I'm less likely to challenge what I'm thinking than the reality that's in front of me?
Absolutely. If I have an assumption which I assume to be true, I won't inspect it. No, because why should I? Because it's true. Have you noticed that when you have arguments with your friends about various things, there's always this feeling of tremendous sense of rightness? As far as you're concerned, your view is right.
Yeah, the more they argue, the more right I become. Yeah,
That's exactly right. Now, Swami Dayananda calls this subjectivity. Because I am seeing it, the snake is there. Because I am seeing it. And so what happens is that when I look at my life, like what type of person am I, what's going to happen is ideas are just going to simply pop up, but they don't just exist in my head as ideas. They pop up as ways of seeing. It might be I'm an idiot, or I'm a fool, or I'm a bit of a failure, or I'm a magnificent person. I'm much more superior and far more intelligent than other people. or I'm not as intelligent as other people and want to be. But what's happened is I look at myself. I'm actually not looking at myself. I'm looking at an idea of myself, right? So when I go, I'm such a loser, I'm having an idea just like the snake. I'm projecting it out as an object. I'm a loser. And then I'm reacting to that. Oh, God, I wish I wasn't. Right? But I haven't made any contact with reality.
Right.
So what happens is the harsh reality is that we're enclosed in ways of seeing based on past experience, and these notions keep coming alive in us as ways of seeing, which is not seeing. It's concluding.
Yeah, right. It's sort of judgment rather than a perceiving, or not perceiving is not the right word, is it? It's not an openness to what it could be, perhaps. Would that be right?
It's what I'm looking at is I'm taking my notions about the world to be the world. I'm taking my notions about myself to be myself. I'm taking my notions about other people to be other people. And I think I'm living in the world. But I'm not living in the world. I'm living in what Dayananda calls my world. I'm not living in the world of reality. But I don't know that because let's say that you say something or do something that I don't like, and I think that you're a real SOB. I go, God, he's such an SOB. Am I aware that I'm having a thought that you're an SOB, or am I actually experiencing an SOB in front of me?
Well, that would be a fairly rare occurrence in my experience, yes.
What's that?
Uh, Seeing that I am having a thought. It's
No,
usually
you don't see that. No,
I'm already swimming downstream with that thought, as if it's come from a reliable source, right?
well, I'm not. It's just an automatic perception. It's a delusion, actually. You're seeing
Mm.
something that's not there. When you're looking at the snake, you're not seeing the rope, are you?
Mm.
When I'm looking at myself, have you ever thought about yourself?
Yes.
Right. Now, when we think that when we're thinking about ourselves, we're actually thinking about ourselves. No, we're not. We're having a thought about ourselves, and then we're having a reaction and other thoughts about that thought. So when I say, have you ever had someone say to you, I just feel such, they come to you and they say, look, I'm just feeling such, like, I feel like I'm just a loser. I'm just a loser, right? Now,
Yep.
what's happening is they are having a thought, just like there is a snake in the corner. They are having a thought about themselves. They're going, I am a loser. And they're taking themselves to be that very thought. That's its only reality. Dayananda thinks it's a delusion. He says, lucky it's a delusion because delusions can evaporate when you see the rope. He says, Dayananda says,
Aren't we quick?
go.
Aren't we quick? It seems that we're really quick to accept a thought and then to have feelings sort of built upon that. Like, okay, so I have this thought, I've just failed at something, like today, something didn't work the way I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have all these thoughts, all these feelings that come to me that go, Joe, that's just typical of your day, that's just typical of how you do stuff. That's just typical of disorganized, world that you live in because of who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
what happens is,
I start being attacked by my own responses to my own thought.
yeah, but you don't know you're thinking. That's the point.
No,
You think
that's right.
you think you're seeing. When I think it's a snake, I give that snake the ontological or the reality of a tree that's external to me, and I go, there's a Dayananda called that objectivity. Because the tree is there, you see it, or because the rope is there, you see it. But you're caught up in because I am seeing it, it is there.
Right. Yeah.
And he says it's like a wall building itself. There's no one there deciding to think, it just happens. He says it's
Right.
like a wall building itself. Subjectivity. He says you become the thinking and the thinking becomes you.
Okay.
And this is normal for human beings. Like if I was discussing with you the American political situation, which I wouldn't want to at the moment, but if I was discussing with you, I think that I'm talking about the political situation. I'm talking about certain political individuals, and you're talking about them. But no, I'm talking about my thoughts about them.
Right. Yeah.
But I am under the delusion that I am talking about the truth.
So we accept those thoughts as real without much question.
No, it's
And
not so much
then,
that. No, it's not so much that we just have the experience of seeing reality. And then we have our thoughts about them and reactions about them. So the first thing is the point of view that comes alive in me based on my past experience, and I'm not seeing, but I think I'm seeing. Now, the big question here is, if this is true, is this being free?
guess not. Not if you can't see the source of it.
If you're not, well, it's not so much the source. We don't need to see the source of our thinking. We just need to see the rope. We need to awaken to the rope.
Right.
Right? This is why Vedanta works, actually, because it's a means to be able to see reality. And when you see reality, the snake disappears and you're seeing the rope.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't matter where that thought came from. If we don't stay with looking at the reality as it actually is, we're sunk, right?
Yes, subjectivity is a point of view. It's a way of seeing. Now, it's more important. Now, there's another important aspect here, which is an existential principle, which is the way you see is the way you be. The way you see is the way you be. Now, can we just have an example of that? So let's say that here I am, and I go, oh, I'm just such a loser. Right? I'm such a loser. Now, again, I'm now being that idea. I'm such a loser. My facial expressions, the thoughts I'm having, the emotions that are arising in me, the physiological reactions of my body, and my conduct will all conform to that way of seeing, because it can't help it. This is a law. The way you see is the way you be. If I am seeing you as an SOB, like, oh, he's such an SOB. Notice the antagonism and my voice or whatever, right? Now, I may, of course, because social life is demands that we pretend, right? I might pretend to put on a face of innocence and friendliness, but deep down, the real thing is I see you as an SOB. And now that's going to be reflected, that's going to saturate my way of, that way of seeing is a way of being. There's a corresponding way of being that goes along with that point of view. So, for example, have you noticed that when you're angry, you don't just have anger in a vacuum? You've got the idea that that person has done something and they deserve condemnation and punishment for what they've done.
Yeah, I'd say most anger is both motivated and justified, right?
Yeah, but yes, and so what happens is it's but basically what I'm trying to get at is that let's see anger as a way of being, depression as a way of being, fear as a way of being, emptiness as a way of being. It doesn't just happen. Before it happens, you're in a world. You can't have a village idiot without a village. So the village you're in is a projection of the idiot in the middle, which is us. So
Okay.
when I'm getting angry with you, or when I'm getting sad or whatever, it doesn't happen. The context of it is there's a way of seeing there. I'm assuming something about reality. I'm no good. And the very notion, the very judgment, I am no good, is a way of being in the world. They're not two things. Yep. They are that judgment embodied. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm.
So everybody you know, and including yourself, often what will happen is something happens in front of you, and what happens is the psychologists call this association. What happens in front of you is then associated with similar experiences that you've had in the past, and then you come to a judgment of what's happening, right? But it's a judgment. Yeah. It's not seeing reality. It's a notion. But it's a notion that has now been projected as experience.
So it's artificially constructed based on something we repeatedly come across in a certain way, and yes. We don't see reality. We don't see the reality of the situation because of that mechanicalness.
No. Yeah, that we don't, because we've got all these built-in notions, and when these notions, particularly notions about ourselves, about what other people are like, and what the world is like. And have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, the world sucks"? Well, some of it sucks. You know, there might be some sucks, but it's not. You see how that's a general idea, right? So what happens is that this is happening all of the time. Is that there's ways of seeing, and there's also corresponding ways of being that go along with those, and that's why life repeats itself again and again and again. That's why we can't change, because we're enclosed in a subjectivity that we don't see. And there's no seeing of reality. There's only projected thinking as experience.
Yeah, so the projection comes out of all those things.
Yeah. We basically, our background, out of our background, our memories of our background, memory, is projected experience. So what happens is I look at myself and I'm looking at myself in a certain way. I look at you, I'm looking at you in a certain way. I'm looking at the world, I look at the world in a certain way in relation to what's happened. And the basis of it is that my mind goes, this is very similar. Well, it actually doesn't. You see, when you look at an analogy, it's alike in some respects, but different in others. We tend not to see the difference. Have you ever heard that people say, "You're just exactly like my last girlfriend"? Right? We associate. It's just associative thinking that continually goes on automatically outside the awareness and the discrimination. This is important. This happens without awareness or discrimination. It's just simply, so what happens is the way I'm seeing you at this moment is determined by my past experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm completely, and I think that I'm looking at a snake, but in actual fact, I'm not completely blind to the rope.
Yeah.
And then what I try and do is, God, I've got a snake here. What do I do? Okay. What I'll do is I'll learn some relaxation techniques so I'm not afraid of the snake. Just a minute. Just let me just catch my breath here. So, okay, breathe in love, breathe out hate. Breathe in love, breathe out hate. Doesn't work.
No, unfortunately.
What happens if I attack it with a stick? What happens if I attack the rope with a snake with a stick? Is that going to solve the problem?
It may do.
How?
You kill the snake.
I'm not here, but do you see what I mean? The whole premise of my activity, my perception and my activity is not right. It's good.
Yeah.
And so I am ignorant. Now, and Dayananda said something very interesting. We're ignorant. We don't know that we're ignorant, and we don't know that we need to be free of this ignorance.
Right. So all these strategies that spill out of the way in which we see it,
Yeah.
they're all based on unrealities, and therefore it's all ungrounded, really, isn't it?
Our cognition is unreal. It's not. Cognition is supposed to put you in touch with the world as it is, ourselves as it is, other people as they are. But when I think of a political opponent on the TV, and I suddenly become full of ill will. Have you ever become full of ill will when you've looked at or listened to some political person?
Oh, yeah, there is plenty of people on the TV that are unpleasant to think about or
Right.
look at.
And if they're not in the party that you support, you hate them.
Well, there's more reason to hate them, isn't it?
And if they're the party you support, you love them. They're nice. That very judgment, they're nice, is a notion, and it's a delusion. Okay? Sometimes people act nicely, sometimes they don't. But the general opinion of someone as nice is always incorrect.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we are. In terms of cognition, we're not free.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because in our Western scriptures, they talk about natural man, doesn't see spiritual things, doesn't see. Do you know what I mean?
So we're not really free to have a basis on which we can see things as they really are, and therefore we can't really have an inner life that's free. So
yeah,
where you go.
Functionally, our cognition might be quite accurate. We get in the car and we drive the car and we do it right, functionally. But when it comes to what is the world, what are human beings, and what is myself, and all of that stuff, we have notions based on appearances. And they're very convincing.
Yeah.
And the thing is, so for Swami Dayananda, the whole point is, the starting point for transformation of a human being is the coming alive in us wisdom. Now, coming alive in us as wisdom, that means a way of seeing that comes from reality, what is, not coming from our past experience and our memories.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to see what is rather than what seems to be. It seems to be that I'm an idiot, or it seems to be that I'm a wonderful person. Dayananda thinks that both of those notions are a delusion. That any notion that you have of yourself is incorrect.
Mm.
Because we think we are the notion.
Mm.
That's why, you can do the cognitive restructuring in psychology and have a better view of yourself, but it's still a view of yourself.
So you're saying that any notion is going to be wrong?
Yes. Any notion
Right.
have you noticed this whole self-improvement thing? I want to become a better version of myself.
Yeah.
So I've got this idea, an ideal. Yes, I'd love to become a nice, loving person. You will never, ever achieve being a loving person, ever. That's a notion.
Okay.
You might achieve being able to respond lovingly to a person in front of you, yes, but that doesn't make you a loving person, because that's what Dayananda called self-objectification. It's making yourself into an object.
Okay. In the sense that I'm looking at something that appears to be myself, or at least is my sense of self in my thoughts, and then I work on that thing as if I'm manipulating a a blob of clay or something.
I'm a loser. I'm looking at myself as an object, and I'd like to become a better object who's a winner.
Mm.
But it's object. It's self-objectification. There's no such thing as a lovely person, actually. Okay. There is a way of being in the world that can be loving, which we're going to go into, but that's got nothing to do with self-objectification.
So you're saying we shouldn't make claims like that about ourselves, about what we are?
Well, we do that all the time. I wouldn't say that we shouldn't, but we do it all the time. And when we're doing it, we're in a world of delusion. We're not living in the world as it is.
We come unstuck, don't
Well, we're enclosed in a cognitive way of seeing.
we?
That's based on past experiences. And this way of seeing comes alive in us automatically without our awareness or discrimination. And then we're looking at our world and we take it to be completely true. So, so when we talk about wisdom, now Dayananda says a very interesting thing. So what can get us out of this crap?
Must be someone else looking at us, shouldn't it?
Well,
if we can't trust our own views and assumptions about ourselves.
right. Now we come to the most important part. The very first thing that happens in Vedanta, the basis of the Vedanta teaching, is the act of listening. So Swami Dayananda says that we've got this ability that's been given to us, and that is the ability to suspend our notions, our judgments, right? So when you actually are listening with an open mind, the judgments are held in suspension. This is the doorway through which we expose ourselves to a presentation of reality that can come alive in us as our way of seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, you're listening to Swami Dayananda's teaching, and when I say listening, that can mean reading one of his books contemplatively, with a listening mind, with an open mind. You see, normally when we read books, we associate the present concept we're looking at with similar concepts that we've had in the past. We then decide whether we agree or disagree with it. And there's no seeing in that. There's no illuminating light. The illuminating light of wisdom is not happening when we read things academically. We can have all of the beautiful Vedantic notions in the world and yet be totally caught up in subjectivity.
Right. True.
So what happens is we start the way that the precondition for a wisdom coming alive in us is the act of listening. So what happens is I suspend my judgments and I expose myself to the teaching that comes from the scriptures.
Okay.
Now, when I say the scriptures, I'm not a Hindu, and and I don't know a lot about the Hindu religion really, but Dayananda is and was a living example. The scripture is in living form. So the wisdom. So what he would do he would unfold the scriptures in such a way that you could see your life in the light of the scripture. You could see your life. There's no point in studying Vedanta as an object. He said that Vedanta is a way, he said a strange thing. He says, Vedanta is you. It's your values, it's the way you live. That's what Vedanta is. So he didn't want us to study Vedanta. He wanted us to study our lives in the light of Vedanta.
Yeah, so you're talking about it not being a mere philosophy.
Absolutely not.
Mm.
So what happens is, here you are, you're listening to Dayananda, and as you're listening, new ways of seeing or understanding open up in you because you've seen what is.
Mm-hmm.
Not because you've studied and learned a Vedanta principle.
So you're saying that the Vedantic teachings will show us what is,
Yeah,
reveal what is,
yeah.
and that's reality.
And that's reality, yeah.
Mm.
He said to me, we are reality people. One time when we were talking, we are reality people. He considered reality extremely therapeutic. That when you actually see the rope, it makes the falsity disappear. But and that's what he meant by, he said a strange thing. He says, Vedanta is cognitive all of the way. Now, why did he say that? It is cognitive all of the way. Because if I'm caught in subjectivity and I think about, okay, what I'll do is I'll do a bit of a religious practice here and a bit of a religious practice there, and that'll change me. There's no wisdom there. There's no opening up the eyes. There's just a form of behaviorism, isn't there?
Yeah, so when you're in action mode, trying to strategize and do things like, I'm going to do this or become that or change this about myself,
Yeah.
we're no longer open to what is outside ourselves, including the teachings of the scriptures, right? Nothing can reach us when we're in that driver seat and press the gas pedal to do what we imagine we should be doing.
Nothing reaches us. We're in darkness. There's because you see, we're too enclosed, and we don't know that we suffer from this disease because we have such a certainty that the way I am seeing is correct. Have you? I'm just convinced of that.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet drug, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it's even if it's not a sweet joke, I'm a loser. I'm having a notion about myself, and I'm taking myself to be that notion. I'm having a notion that you're a son of that you're a SOB, and then I'm taking you to be that SOB that I'm thinking about. But I think that when I'm looking out, I'm seeing reality. No, I'm not. I'm seeing my thoughts in the form of an experience that I'm facing. So that's why reality needs to be unfolded in front of you so that you see. And so when Dayananda would talk, you'd be sitting there listening to him, and then you'd suddenly go, you'd actually go, oh, I see. You were just seeing, it's true. People and things don't hurt you. They're only instrumental in revealing a self-dissatisfaction that's always there. You actually see that as a fact, And because you see that as a fact, all blame in this moment, if I'm seeing this as a fact this moment, because we can forget what we understand, that's the partly we can lose sight of the wisdom that that's come alive in us. It doesn't just sit there, solidly. So here I am, when I see the fact that the problem is located with me, if I see the fact, all blaming is set aside effortlessly. Because I see the truth that the problem is centered on me. I am the one who is self-dissatisfied. I can't stand being the way I am. And so, and this is the important thing, this is why Vedanta worked. You know, when I said before that the way you see is the way you be?
Yeah.
So if I suddenly see that I am not my notions of myself, all my good, beautiful notions and all my bad, that they have nothing to do with me, the being I am. They are not, they are delusional. There's a tremendous burden that comes off me in the understanding of that.
Great.
Because it's only the illuminating light. And when we say illumination, we mean, when we say realization, it means that something that was unreal now becomes real.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Realization. That's good.
Yeah, and that is the only thing that changed me. Once I have that understanding, in my interpersonal relationships, if I am ever upset with another human being, I'm caught in the delusion of blaming. And the moment I actually, right here, right now, as I am, I come to this understanding opens up and comes alive in me again. When that understanding comes alive in me, the way I see is the way I be. I am now a non-blaming person. If there's no change in being, it's not wisdom.
So the change of being is a sort of letting go, is it, of my notion of things,
No,
including my notion of self.
no, I wouldn't say that. That happens. Dayananda says, if you sit yourself in front of a tree and you've got your eyes closed, right? And then he says, open your eyes and then try not to see the tree.
Sure.
You can't do that.
That's not easy.
Right. Now, when you get a teacher like Dayananda, a competent teacher, what happens is he unfolds reality and you just see. And because you see, you change.
Mm-hmm.
A whole new way of seeing comes alive in you, and it comes alive in you because you've seen what really is as opposed to what seems to be. It seemed like I was an idiot. Okay, it seemed, that's Plato was the first to really make a distinction between what appears to be appearances and what really is. Our whole, have you ever heard that saying, the truth that the truth will set you free?
Yes, I have, yeah.
That means that the light of wisdom comes alive in you as a new mind, a mind that actually sees the truth. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of being, isn't it?
Okay, so you're saying that the seeing isn't the truth will set you free. We tend to think of truth as something we know, something we are.
Something we have.
Hmm.
We think I've read my books. Oh, yes, I've got it now. Yep, I'm learning. Oh, it's fantastic. I'm accumulating. My goodness, am I smart or am I smart?
Hmm.
But right here, right now, So I've got all of this information that I take to be knowledge, but right here now, I'm having an argument with my spouse and dramatizing unkindness. And yet I can think that, because I've got a notion of myself, I'm pretty smart. I know lots of stuff. Or I'm spiritually very wise. When I'm arguing with my spouse, am I being wise?
Yeah, well, with all that knowledge in the background, you ought to be.
But it's not knowledge. It's not wisdom.
No,
What
not if it ends. Yeah.
It's mental representations about reality. It is not seeing. So when we look at wisdom, we're looking at when I am seeing what is, that is being wise. The problem is often we can assume we're wise when we're not, because we've got a self notion, I'm a wise person. I compare myself with other people and I'm smarter than they are. But is that true? That's looking at a snake, isn't it? Having a self notion that's quite gratifying and self-edifying and self-supportive.
Yeah, it doesn't sound true.
No. So the difference is that you can have in your mind different concepts, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
They have nothing to do with wisdom. That won't liberate you. You can read, I'm an overread person. I've read too many books.
Mm-hmm.
But yet here I was at 56 or whatever and completely miserable. How come?
Mm.
If I was so smart, how come?
Maybe you read the wrong books.
He's being facetious.
Sorry.
Okay. So what we're talking about here is that when wisdom comes alive in us as a way of seeing, it brings about a new way of being. That's what he meant by cognitive all of the way. He said you need two things. You need the wisdom, then you need to live the wisdom. Right? You're not applying a theory. You're living an understanding. So let's say, for example, you're having an argument with your spouse and you go, oh my goodness. Here I am being caught up in myself again. I'm thinking that my spouse is causing my problems. Right? Do you see how that's the action of wisdom coming in, coming alive in me, and it delivers me and saves me from this stupidity. And if it comes alive in me, suddenly I find myself not blaming. So wisdom, now I'm living the wisdom, aren't I?
Yeah.
So my practice is to live the wisdom, not to apply information. That's in functional living. When we learn carpentry or we learn whatever we learn, accountancy or whatever it is, or psychological counseling or whatever we happen to do, right? We learn it and then we apply it. Is that true in the functional world?
That's right.
Right. But we're not dealing with the functional world here. We're dealing with living in the functional world in an entirely new way, with an entirely different mind. Wisdom comes alive in you as a new mind that is in touch with reality. This is why Dayananda says that the primary issue is the reduction of subjectivity.
Right. So that would be seeing things as they really actually are.
Yeah, and that's not some big cosmic thing, I'm seeing the truth. It's right here, right now, as I am seeing what is happening. And because he thought you can only respond to reality once you know what it is. You can't respond to reality if you're not aware of it. you can't do that. So when we're looking at this endeavor, what we want to do is we want freedom. Is that true? We want freedom while living.
Yeah.
When I'm enclosed in subjectivity, because I'm seeing it, it's there, am I being free?
No, because I'm being determined by all those thoughts and concepts that come out of me, perceptions,
Very good.
associations. Yeah.
So it's only when a new mind comes alive in me that's been informed by the wisdom of the scriptures that have now come alive in me as a new way of seeing, that's awakened to reality, not in some abstract sense, not in some theoretical sense, but I see right now that I'm upset. The upset is not being caused by external things. The upset is because I am suffering from this universal problem that we all have, and it's centered on me. So therefore, the solution can only be centered on me as well. The location of the solution must also be me, as well as the location of the problem. When I'm seeing it like that, do you see how I'm seeing reality? But it's a seeing that liberates you from the delusion that the world is making me unhappy.
So we usually think of reality as something out there, right? But what you're talking about is seeing, in a way, the process of, well, the state of being that I am and the process that ensues because of it.
Once we know what reality is, we then have a dialectic between ourselves with a mind that is wise and ourself that is a mind that is subjective. There's going to be an interplay with this whole thing of karma yoga. There will be an interplay between a recognition, oh, I'm being subjective, and then shifting into objectivity. Oh, I'm being subjective, I'm shifting into because he called it the yoga of objectivity, living in the world as it is. He considered that he said that someone asked him a question once. They says, Swamiji, what is the meaning of life? Typical big question between the guru and the student. And he said, well, the meaning of life is to live. He said, but you are only living when you are alive to facts. You get that? You are only living when you are alive to facts. That means that we have a different kind, an objective mind as opposed to a subjective mind.
So a subjective mind, the way you're using it, is an interpretive mind rather than a way of seeing.
Now, it's a way of seeing, but he says a subjective mind is because I am seeing it, it is there.
Right, okay.
An objective mind is because it's there, I'm seeing it. What he was interested in is becoming alive to facts, not getting caught up in romantic spiritual notions. He considered living in the world of reality a religious act. because he considered the presence of everything is the presence of Ishvara. And so he made a distinction between living in God's world or living in your own world, or living in your own world or living in Ishvara's world. Ishvara is a word that the Hindus use for God. So what we're discussing tonight is that when we talk about freedom, we mean a mind that is objective, as opposed to a mind which is subjective. A subjective mind is enslaved. It is caught in a darkness that it does not know anything about. And so what the teaching does, what Dayananda's teaching does, what his psychology does, is it brings about a mind, a new mind that is filled with reality, not our subjective notions. And he considered this of utmost importance.
Yeah.
Now, next week, or our next session, tonight we wanted to look at what does it mean to appreciate freedom in terms of cognition. Because when you're subjective, there's cognition, isn't there? It just happens not to conform to facts.
Yeah, that's right. Instead, it's replaced by notions, perceptions, associations, past interpretations, very quick mechanical assumptions of it's a snake instead of a rope.
And it is our default position as a human being. I put my hand up. I am a sufferer of subjectivity. I get examples of it every day where I'm becoming subjective.
Mm-hmm.
What liberates me from that subjectivity is the practice of objectivity. That's what Swami Dayananda redefined in a book called The Yoga of Objectivity. He redefined, put it in Karma Yoga as the practice of objectivity. So when you're living a life of objectivity, you are living a life of Karma Yoga, which we will be going into. But all I wanted to do tonight was we're looking at the first part, what opens up a new life for us. It is we listen, our minds become illuminated, so we get a new mind that can see reality. And then once that mind has become alive in us, we can forget it, but luckily we can always then come back to it once it's come alive in us. And the more we live this objectivity, the more stably objective we become. But we have to live it. If we don't live it, it will not become settled in us. It'll just be fragile and just it means nothing. It's the practice of living objectively that we are being objective. We can't, if we don't live objectivity, we can't be objective.
Right. And you're suggesting that we cannot manufacture that objective mind.
No. The objective mind is full of objects. It's full of the presence of what is. The presence of what he calls the given. The presence of the given. So when we're living in the world, and that world is the presence of the given, because it's there, I'm seeing it, I'm alive to facts, that is an entirely different mind than the subjective mind. And I can't help but be the mind I'm being. So if I am being subjective, my life and my way of being in the world is a subjective way of being in the world. If I'm being objective,
does it sometimes involve seeing things as they don't, other than what they seem? Seeing objectively, seeing reality, does that mean sometimes we have to see things how they don't in other ways than they seem. Like, I'm looking at something and I think it's a snake, but actually it's a rope. So I have to see it in a different way, right? It has to show itself to me as what it really is.
Yeah. What it's basically there's one problem with many diverse forms. We have to recognize basically all at this right here, right now, at right here, right now, as I am being subjective. That actually is seeing the fact. That is wisdom. The fact that I see that I'm being subjective is the operation of wisdom.
Okay, that's a pretty good start.
That's where we start. You see, if we go into spiritual la la land, we won't want to go right now. I'm depressed. Right now I'm feeling empty. Right now I'm being unkind. Right now I'm not being very accommodating. This is very important to see these things because it's not the game is not becoming a nice person, but becoming alive to facts.
Right, yeah.
Right? That is the religious act. That's what he calls living in Ishvara's world, which we'll go into next time. Because
Okay.
but what we wanted to look at tonight was the whole area of cognition. The other two areas is our heart, which is the what moves us, and the other is conduct. But the entry point to a new life, the entry point to the new life is our cognition, is the coming alive in us of wisdom. All right?
Great. Thanks, Bede.
Okay, Joe. Thank you very, very much.
See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.